All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Hellraiser, with the return of Pinhead, this time played by Jamie Clayton, from director David Bruckner, who did The Night House last year, which was a pretty damn good, scary movie. But a lot of people have been really looking forward to this new Hellraiser after a string of direct-to-video, bleh, entries in this series. So I am very excited to talk about it. Joining me is Lauren Knight from That Movie Is Fine. We have a great conversation, lots of really fun puzzle pieces to get into. And before we get to that, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And, of course, you can follow us on social media at PiecingPod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And I do want to let you know about our Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, as well as from Awesome Movie Year and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there, so check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. Of course, there's a link in the show notes. And otherwise, just keep listening, and I'm really happy that you're out there. But if you want to support the show that way, we really appreciate it. So, with that said, let's talk about Hellraiser. All right, it's time to talk about Hellraiser, and joining me is Lauren from That Movie Is Fine. Lauren, how's it going?
Hi, David. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping to get a big Hellraiser fan on this one, and like you have told me, you love this series, huh? Have you seen all of them? Because I haven't seen like the later direct-to-video ones.
I have seen every single one. I have read The Hellbound Heart, and I even have a Pinhead tattoo.
Beautiful.
So I feel like I'm somewhat qualified. But yeah, I will defend Hellraiser Judgment, which was the last of like the DTV ones, like to keep the rights. I will defend the ideas that movie presented. It's, even though it's not at all by any means a perfect movie. But yes, I have seen them all. I love almost all of them in their own way, even the bad ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, so very, very excited to be here.
It's a very rich world with which to make movies. Like, it's surprising we haven't gotten more successful entries in the series other than the first few and this one. We'll get into it as we're talking about the movie, but yeah, I mean, there's so much to it, and there's so many different directions to go with these kinds of characters and the kind of themes that play around in the Hellraiser world and those books. So yeah, I don't know, it's a weird thing. But before we get too deep into Hellraiser, it is your first time on the show. Why don't you tell people a little about you and your podcast?
Oh, thank you. My name is Lauren Knight, everyone. You can find me on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram at That Movie Is Fine, which led to an idea of doing a podcast of my own with my friend and creative partner, Erin Hudson. So we host the That Movie Is Fine, the podcast together. I have 7 years working in film exhibition. I was a film programmer and live events manager for the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema when they had locations out here. Then they became a different theater called Majestic Neighborhood Cinema Grill, and I was with them through the transition, and I departed in mid-April. And so I launched my own live events, theatrical screenings, and celebrity appearances company, and that's going really well. And you can follow that on Instagram at LA Knight Consulting.
Awesome stuff. And I hope our paths cross for some of these kinds of events at some point. I love doing things with movie theaters, with exhibition, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it's really fun stuff, and it's great what you're doing. That's really great stuff.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we've Majestic has done actually some live podcast recordings since I've departed also. So if you're ever in Phoenix, like, you could set up a screening and you could record live, and like the audience will stay there, and then like it could get, audience feedback and things like that. So definitely, we interact on Twitter all the time. So
yeah, absolutely. We're going to make it happen. But let's talk about Hellraiser. To your podcast, that movie is fine. Would you say that this movie is fine? That's kind of where I landed on it. Like, it's like I wanted to love it. I really did, and I would say that it's probably the third best Hellraiser as far as I'm concerned, and it's still good. I really enjoyed it, but fine. Is that where it kind of landed for you?
I have it just above that. I have it as more than fine, but only just
Okay.
barely. I think it's
Hmm.
because I was just grateful that it didn't suck, right?
That's
Like
fair.
that it
Yeah.
just did not suck. I'm not the biggest fan of, say, the new like Halloween installments, right? So
Yeah. Me
like to
neither.
me it could have been way worse, but I'm just thankful that we've got like a new legitimate entry into the
Hmm.
franchise that will presumably spawn other, high budget, high concept sequels.
Yeah.
So, I'd say that the third act for me had me just like flipping out in a good, like in
Hmm.
all the good ways. And so it bumped it up to more than fine, but I
Yeah.
admit it might be kind of like just I'm so excited to have gotten a new Hellraiser. Like
Yeah. Sure.
but
Yeah.
we're probably similar. We're probably
Hmm.
similar, but I really did like the third act. So,
Yeah. And that's when things get crazy and the Cenobites really like you get to see them all in action and of course Jamie Clayton finally getting to do stuff as Pinhead and she's great and so yeah, hopefully we will be getting more of these. But yeah, it's again, it's just a weird series to kind of talk about. Like I just recently rewatched the first one for the first time in many, many, many years, and God, it's just so good. It's so hard to even kind of stand up to that. And I thought the second one was a lot of fun, and I thought this one was fun for for what it is. But yeah, it's a tough thing to crack, though. I think I think there's so many angles to kind of like get into it from that it kind of makes it a difficult series to make entries in, which is probably why a lot of the direct to video ones didn't quite work so well. That and bad scripts and whatnot. But but let's start getting into some puzzle pieces, and that'll kind of take us through some of these things that worked and didn't work here. But I know I have more than you, so I'm going to actually kick it off myself with the first one, and I'm going to go with the Wishmaster series for a puzzle piece here. You know, our main character here learns that this puzzle box can bring her dead brother back. And from that point forward, I mean, it kind of turns into like a Jinn or genie type movie where every like would be good wish is going to have a bad side and is going to backfire in some way. And of course the Cenobites are promising some chance at getting her brother back, but of course that's going to be awful and lead to like death and horrible stuff. And so just like the Wishmaster series, kind of playing with that kind of like genie type symbolism, I feel like this movie is kind of using the Hellraiser brand and the Pinhead character and the Cenobite characters to kind of play in that same kind of world.
oh, that's a really good one, actually.
Yeah.
My first one is not, I'm just going to get it out of the way. And I know it's sort of cheating, but it really does play a huge role.
Hmm.
Hellraiser 2 or Hellbound Hellraiser
Okay.
2. Like, I know that's
Uh huh.
cheating, but I flipped out when there was reference to Leviathan and things like that. I'm like, oh
Hmm.
my God, are we going to get more of Leviathan? Are we going to get more of Hellraiser 2? And so I think that was an interesting way to take it. And if people have only seen the first one, then like they might be confused
Sure.
but I was so excited that they were kind of playing more off of Hellraiser 2 because we don't really I don't think Leviathan, it's been a while since I've seen all of the Hellraiser movies, but I don't think the Leviathan plays into any of the sequels.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so this sets it up for different ways the story can go, including an
Yeah.
actual like remake of the first one. So like if they wanted to, hypothetically do like a Kirsty Julia story down the road or
Yeah.
something, like it would still fit in that realm. So I know my first
Yeah.
one's cheating, but it's clearly an influence. It's clearly a puzzle piece. So I'm counting
Yeah.
it.
Well, that's the thing when you're talking about a series with like 8 entries and all these sequels and based on books, like of course there's going to be some amount of inspiring itself in trying to reboot the franchise. And it is interesting though to bring up the second one specifically because you're right. I mean, this feels a lot more like a continuation of the second one
Hmm.
and kind of leaving behind the first one, which I think is smart because like I was saying, the first one is just so damn good. It's like how do you unless you're going to completely start over, like how do you follow that up exactly? So I was going to ask you, you've read some of these books, like is this particular story like from your memory, like is it in any of the books or was this an original story just based on the world?
So I've only read The Hellbound Heart, which was just Hellraiser 1. And
Okay.
actually a few of the changes they made in Hellraiser, like Kirsty is not the daughter in the book.
Hmm.
She's like an ex like lover to Rory. Like it's but still kind of
Okay.
but still loves him. Anyway, so the first one is actually a lot like the book.
Hmm.
I think the second one Clive wrote for the film, but didn't actually. I don't think it is a short story.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
believe Clive did write and direct Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Um,
Hmm.
but I do know that Clive had said that the new that Bruckner's Hellraiser has inspired him to write a new Hellraiser story
Oh,
using
nice.
the Jamie Clayton version of Pinhead. So
Okay.
that also is really, exciting for a fan like me, and I would love to read more. I'm not familiar with him continuing the story of like the Cenobites and things like
Right,
that, but
right.
he did create Leviathan for the second Hellraiser, so
Yeah.
it is canon if you want to call it that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go on to another big reboot that I feel was kind of an influence on this, and that is the Evil Dead reboot, which used a main character with addiction issues to kind of give an added layer to kind of tying in this like classic horror story. And I understand that one of maybe the, like, later direct-to-video ones also kind of played with that kind of an idea. I haven't seen that one, like I said, but, it has been done a lot lately, I feel like bringing in, like, various kinds of, like, addiction-type issues to kind of bring characters into these worlds of horror, and, that one is done just so damn well, and I still, to this day, think is one of the best, horror reboots or remakes, and the fact they were able to pull it off there, I think, kind of makes sense that they would try it here.
I agree. I actually just saw Smile in theaters
Hmm.
last week, and that one is not about addiction, but it is about mental health and mental well-being
Sure.
and dealing with trauma. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue like the similarities there. There is a lot of horror these days that are focusing on mental health or like not being believed right,
Yeah.
or how addiction affects more than just the person who's the addict, right? It is
Yeah.
like a cancer that affects everyone around you. So no, that's really great. I think the Evil Dead reboot is a great one. Aesthetically for me, because I one of the things I just fell in love with the Hellraiser franchise is all the like practical effects and the makeup
Hmm.
and things like that. Like it's so grotesque and just, but
Yeah.
like beautiful also. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. So part of the aesthetic for me, which equally is beautiful but also gives me the heebie-jeebies, is Silent Hill.
Oh,
So
sure.
like the Silent Hill movies and the Silent Hill, well, specifically the first Silent Hill movie, but the Silent Hill franchise, um, had some of the designs could have fit in that world for me as well. Some of the
Yeah.
Cenobite looks,
Yeah.
and so I don't know if that is a legitimate piece or not. But watching it, I was like, oh, this is Silent Hill creepy vibes for me, and I totally was digging it.
Absolutely. And, this kind of falls into a thing that's happened on this show a lot when talking about reboots of classic horror movies. these classic horror movies go and inspire these things that come out later, and then those things go and inspire the reboots or remakes, later on from there. So I would think Silent Hill is completely inspired by the original Hellraiser, and then I would think you're absolutely 100% accurate in that then inspired where some of these designs kind of went with this new one. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff going on with the Cenobites. I do wish, and maybe this sounds weird, but I wish the effects, that like the gore effects, were wetter looking. Does that make sense? Like, not everything just looks so like smooth and HD. I wish it was like, a little goopier,
Yeah, that was one of my biggest, I guess you could say, disappointments. I mean, I still loved how like macabre and like fetishy things
Yeah.
were, but there it was this new trend of, elevated horror, and like everything has to be so pristine in a weird way,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a horror movie. Like it's missing that messy, squelchy ness. I mean,
Yeah.
some people also think it's missing the horniness also.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but we've seen that it's been done, but it also opens, the door to doing that also down the road, because they've clearly established that, the Leviathan can bring
Yeah.
you different things. It can bring you pleasure, it can bring you power, it can bring you like
Yeah.
all of these things, just with, caveats attached. um
Sure.
so yeah, I agree with you. Everything was very sleek. There wasn't anything, even when we see the guy at the beginning, or like get ripped apart, you're not
Mm-hmm.
that, like, that's missing, because you actually see Frank get ripped apart in the first one. You see,
Sure.
in all the continuations of them, like, you see the gore. And this
Yeah.
one, there isn't that much gore, because they're being hooked and then dragged to hell, and we
Yeah.
don't get to go to that hell yet. We don't get to go to where the Leviathan is, like in Hellbound 2. So,
Yeah.
I think it was a good like setup and a good world introduction for
Yeah.
new people, I think.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a great entry point. And yeah, hopefully things get hornier in the next one and just dirtier in every possible
Yeah,
way. And
gorier
you see where,
even.
yeah, you see where it's like on its way there. It's just not quite yet. And we'll get there, I think,
Yeah.
hopefully. So, yeah. Silent Hill getting its start in the video game world. I'll go with Mortal Kombat for my next puzzle piece here. And
Really?
I joked about this in my Letterboxd review. Some of the dialogue here, and you know what, this actually kind of falls into that same category we were just talking about with Silent Hill, where it's like things that the original Hellraiser inspired then go on to inspire, the new reboot. But some of these lines, like "save your breath for screaming" and angels, he called them. You'd think the devil would know a devil. They just sound like things that Mortal Kombat characters would say, And it's I love the original Hellraiser, and I thought this one was pretty great, but the idea that any of it is particularly scary is, like, I think kind of silly. Like, I think it's more just, it's like cool, you know what I mean? It's like, it's cool imagery, and I think it kind of goes back to that same kind of point of view that like the Mortal Kombat games and movies are going from, where it's like you want to just see some cool gore and violence and just over the top hell type, imagery. Here it is, have at it, and so it kind of has a lot of that kind of point of view, I think.
That's really interesting and really fun. And now I'm not going to look at it the same way ever again. We it could have used more spine ripping for sure. I think we
Yes,
could have used a little
yes.
bit more spine ripping, but again, I do think they're setting up for more. But
Hmm.
that's
There's a
that's
lot of
really
chains
interesting.
and fire and like gates and things like that. All the things that you would imagine in a Mortal Kombat setting are in this, especially once they get to the house at the end, and like, they're kind of stuck in the house, and chains and boxes and gears and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, as a quick tangent, the puzzle box, I love it. It's just such like a cool like MacGuffin or whatever you would call it. Like, that thing with all of its little gears and things. It's just so cool. I love
I
that.
love that they expanded that mythology because and it has different configurations within
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Like I normally don't watch trailers for movies that I like actively am excited about and want to see because I believe
Yeah,
most trailers these days obviously give away too much. But I
sure.
was so nervous about Hellraiser that I watched the trailer because I was also excited
Mm-hmm.
but also really nervous. So I watched it and like I was intrigued by what I thought was the new box design, but I was still a little like, oh, it's not a cube, because they only show that weird pointy at the
Yeah,
top and
yeah.
bottom and flat on the side. So I'm glad that at some point my husband was like, just wait, it'll be a cube, it'll be a cube, it'll be a cube. Because I was like,
Yeah.
it's not a cube. And then finally it was a cube, and that was just one configuration of it. And I thought that was actually a really clever way to go. But then it
Yeah.
calls into question like, is it retconning, which I normally hate? Is it retconning the other Hellraiser movies? Or is it
Mm-hmm.
just, the Hellraiser movies were just focused on the one configuration and the person died before there was ever a chance to do other configurations? You know what I mean? Like when
Mm.
you're creating a
Yeah.
new mythology based on old mythology, like could the first Hellraiser still exist in this universe?
Sure,
Based on the
sure.
different patterns like, and it probably could. It probably could just get stuck
Yeah.
on one configuration, you know?
I think that's an interesting way to look at it, that yeah, that it was stuck on that one configuration during the first movie, and so it does still fit in there. Like, yeah, I think that's a cool way to look at it. As long as we're talking about the puzzle box, I'm going to kind of just throw another puzzle piece in
Yeah.
here. I was thinking of the Da Vinci Code. Um,
Okay.
just like a focus on puzzles and ancient texts and signs and all the like kind of religious-y kind of feel to everything that kind of goes along with the puzzles and the puzzle box, and all of the rules and the expanded universe of the Cenobites and the puzzles. And so I just thought a little bit of that kind of imagery was kind of in here, and to that point of like the different configurations, kind of maybe each one could come back in their own movies and things like that. Like there's just such a big uh puzzle based thing going on here that I think that the Da Vinci Code was kind of such a, I don't know, it was just such a major influence when it comes to puzzles and movies over the last 10, 20 years.
That's a really good point. I didn't even really think too much about the puzzle side of things. I almost, in some ways, one of the negatives for me, think this movie bit off a little more than it could chew, at
Mm-hmm.
least for the time allotted. I know the pacing was uneven, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. And I think that's where the current state of horror is a detriment, where it takes an hour before things really get going, and then you have 20 minutes and then it's over, kind of thing,
Yeah.
So I do think
Yeah.
the pacing suffers, but it could have been longer to explore the different configurations, kind of like you were saying, like
Sure.
almost like it needed to be a separate movie for like the next configuration and so on and so forth. But um
Yeah.
I do still like what they did. But my next puzzle piece, this might be a stretch, but it had some elements in there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um Polanski's Repulsion.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if you've seen it, but like when and the scene of like what is it? It was Catherine Deneuve in that movie in Repulsion,
I
I think.
believe that's who it
But
was.
anyway, the lead actress in Repulsion like stumbles down a hallway and she sees all these
Yeah.
figures, grabbing at her, and then are they in her mind or not? And then she gets like sexually assaulted, but there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing there. And so I caught some kind of low key, maybe Polanski influences, like Rosemary's Baby, Repulsion, things like that. I'm not
Yeah.
a Polanski expert. I personally choose not to watch his films anymore, but I
Mm-hmm.
have seen a few of them, and he does a great job with suspense and building, like, is it there or is it not there? Is it in your mind? Kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so yeah, so I'd say it had some Polanski vibes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great one, and it is Catherine Deneuve that was
Okay.
in that for sure. And yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes back to like there's a lot happening in this movie. Like between dealing with all of the things with the puzzle box to introducing this new main character to finding out that this other guy has already been through things with the Cenobites and we have to learn about him too. Like there's a lot of things going on here. And so yeah, there's just a lot, but definitely I could see the repulsion aspect, especially with the main character having to deal with all this stuff that's kind of being thrown at her all at once between
And her
losing her brother.
addiction and mental health and like all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So many things all at once. So yeah, I like that. Great piece there. I will go with another one here. Another classic horror. I feel like there's a lot of classic horror franchises all kind of converging here, but and this is more so to just particular scenes, but Nightmare on Elm Street. I was thinking, especially when she's kind of stuck in that nightmare world, but she's actually in the back of the van and they're speeding away from the house. I was reminded. I believe it might have been Freddy vs. Jason that I'm particularly thinking of, but it was some Nightmare on Elm Street movie where her friends are kind of like driving her away from the scene of all the violent action, and she's stuck in a dream, dealing with Freddy. They crash while they're speeding away. There's something like that, and that happened here as they're trying to get away the first time from the house, and. So yeah, I mean, just those like kind of dream worlds that they have to fight the villain in while also dealing with it in the real world at the same time made me think of the way that Freddy encounters happen in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
That's interesting. Yeah, there are some similarities between just the like mythologicalness
Yeah,
of like the Cenobites and like the Freddy, mythos. They both require some type of magical impetus, like not falling asleep or solving this puzzle box, so they still require some sort of like magic. So no, that's a good one. I mean, I do think
right on.
80s slashers were in an influence. One that actually came to mind while we've been talking, so it's getting like my brain juices flowing.
Sure.
The end, like house climax, kind of gave me 13 Ghosts vibes also.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I've actually seen people mention this, and I've never seen 13 Ghosts. And I've seen like a few people mention this as a potential puzzle piece for this. And so I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one. Okay, so it's not crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, good. No, you should totally watch 13 Ghosts. It is a lot of fun. But like it all takes place, like in this mansion, and it's different ghosts that are like trapped there. And so it was basically more when they were letting the Cenobites into the house, one by one. And again, even some of the creature design. But yeah, so it kind of becomes like a haunted house movie by the end.
It does.
So 13 Ghosts is what I was thinking of while we were talking about stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I could.
That's funny.
Maybe it's old enough to be an influence.
I gotta watch that movie one of these days. But yeah, it's funny. It does kind of become like a haunted house, and they're like trapping these demons from hell in this house, and it's kind of weird. Like I kind of feel like maybe they wrote themselves into a corner a little bit with that ending, But at least you get to see the Cenobites a whole bunch, so that's cool.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things for me too. Was it took. I don't know, there's a trend these days too about not really staying on the shot very long or the reveal very long. And I don't know if that's, because you don't really want people to see the errors of your character design or the flaws in the CGI. But like, I am glad that we finally did get to see the Cenobites like in their full form, but I still feel like it was flashes. Like, I don't feel like they held shots too long, especially since it was all it was practical effects. Bruckner did confirm that, like, and so the fact that it's practical and not CGI, like I would want that highlighted more. And just there's a lot of, I don't want to say frenetic editing, but it's more just like, we're not going to stay very long, we're going to cut, and we're not going to stay very long, we're going to cut. And like, I want to see those designs. I don't want to have to look at stills online of what the Cenobites fully look like,
Sure.
So yeah, I just
Speaking of those, like, I already brought up Evil Dead, but I think there was a teeth chattering demon in Ash vs. Evil Dead series, wasn't
Oh,
there?
was the oh, I
I
saw the
think so.
first season and there might have been. The Chatterer is like
Okay.
my favorite besides Pinhead. So I was
Yeah.
really
Oh
glad
yeah.
that they created a new Chatterer.
Yeah.
I do
That
wish
was a
that
cool
like
one.
the body proportions of the Cenobites were not all the same. Like
Mm.
they were definitely like slender models, which slenderness can be creepy if done
Mm-hmm.
right, right? Like there's Slender Man, and even like Jack Skellington is like big eyes, really tiny, but like so there can be
Yeah.
kind of an unsettling. But like every single Cenobite was model looking, and I think it would have been cooler to do. There was kind of the blobby, bulbous Cenobite in the first one
Sure.
that had like the black sunglasses on kind of thing.
Oh yeah, he
And
was
so
great.
yeah, and so I think almost like the original Cenobites almost reminded me of the Seven Deadly Sins in a
Mm-hmm.
way, and I wasn't getting that vibe um
Yeah.
from this movie.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, they did kind of have that kind of representation of different sins almost in a way, and yeah, here it's just like kind of they're all the same
Like they're all like
thing basically.
beautiful but also terrifying.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know if they're all pretty, that doesn't really,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll go to my final piece, which is kind of just a silly one, but this goes back to our puzzle box, which, like I said, is just super cool. And I joked on Twitter that I really want one that I can like flip the little pieces around and hear little gears chunking and
Oh, be
churning and
careful
all
what
that
you
stuff.
wish for.
I want one so bad. I don't
I
care if it
know.
sends me to hell. But it made me think of fidget spinners, which were like really big like 5 years ago. So that's my final puzzle piece. Not a movie, but like just that fad where they were like the biggest thing. You find them at every 7-Eleven and everybody was playing with
Yes.
them. It just seems like a perfect time to include a fidget spinner in a horror movie. Why not? You
Oh my
know?
gosh, that would be hilarious. That would be amazing. Like you have the Ouija board movie, like you have the series of
Sure.
Ouija boards. So it'd be funny if there was like a, a fidget spinner that unlocks
It
a
spins
gate.
really quick and then cuts your fingers off or
Yeah.
something.
Oh,
Like,
that's good.
there we go.
That's good.
Yeah.
My last one is kind of silly, but not as like silly as yours. But it's really, I really just wanted to mention it because I wanted to give a shout out to like the writer and director. There's a movie called Daniel Isn't Real, and I
Okay,
don't know if
yeah.
you've seen it or not, but it's by Adam Egypt Mortimer.
Hmm.
And after I saw it, this was I saw it shortly after Bruckner had actually been announced. And I like Bruckner as a horror director, don't get me wrong. Like I felt that Hellraiser was very capable, like in his capable hands. So I
Sure,
was
yeah.
less nervous when I heard that Bruckner was attached. But Daniel Isn't Real is this movie about mental health, and like, is it in his mind or is it not in his mind, on top of all of his mental health things. Spoiler alert,
Mm,
it isn't in his mind. He does
yeah.
have mental health issues, but he also is seeing this demonic presence in his life, called Daniel.
Yeah.
And there's the very, very end where he has to go into Daniel's realm. And it's basically like Hellraiser 2. And he has to, and
Mhm.
there's the walls move and there's brick, and it's more like neon lighting as opposed to like blood red lighting or like black lighting, so it's a little bit more neon kind of thing, but that's
Yeah.
that's just Adam
Yeah.
Egypt's thing. But after it was over, I took to Twitter and I was like, man, I would love to see Adam Egypt Mortimer's take on a Hellraiser movie, because the
Sure.
last bit of Daniel Isn't Real was a lot like Hellbound, and the
Mhm.
creature designs in there were like grotesque and repulsive but really awesome, and this other like hell world that Adam created was really great. So I don't know if it was an influence or not. I wish it were, if it
Yeah.
wasn't, but I really just wanted to throw out Daniel Isn't Real for people to hopefully watch, And Adam Egypt Mortimer responded to my tweet. He was like, "Hey, me too. I'd love to do a Hellraiser movie." But I just, yeah. So Daniel Isn't Real has similar tropes and themes, and then it ends a lot kind of like Hellraiser 2. So
Right on.
I'm putting that down as my final puzzle piece.
I think that sounds great, and I haven't seen it, but I remember that poster. That is like a real memorable poster, the Daniel Isn't Real poster, and
Yeah.
the Hellraiser movies always have such great artwork, and the way you're describing like the final sequences and the neon light, that's such like an interesting take on it. Like I'd love to see that, and I'd love to see him make a Hellraiser because that sounds like it would be a
Yes!
cool direction.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need a director for the sequels. Bruckner's not going to do all 8, so
Yeah.
hopefully but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's not seen. It wasn't seen as much. It was on Shudder for a while, but just the design, like the production design and the character designs were just so good that it had me craving more in that style from Adam. So
Yeah, well, that is a great last puzzle piece, and that does it for all our puzzle pieces. So, do you have any like closing thoughts? Anything we didn't quite get to while going through the pieces that you wanted to bring up?
no, I'm good. I'm just really, really excited that as a Hellraiser fan, I have something new. I'm excited to hear that some people even liked it better than the first one and or the second. While I may not
Yeah,
necessarily agree, it means it's a whole new like gateway for fans, right? It's
sure.
for people younger than us. The whole cast was younger than we were, I think, right? Like all the kids in
Probably.
it. But yeah, so I'm really excited that it builds on like kind of a foundation that was there and then is taking it somewhere new. So I'm hopeful, but I'm glad that it's kind of a gateway for some people to
Yeah.
discover a franchise that is my absolute favorite when it comes to horror franchises. So
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I only other thing I'd say is just one more shout to Jamie Clayton. I thought was great, as Pinhead, and so hopefully if they do continue this forward, she'll be back to do more of that. And yeah, otherwise I think we got to most of it. So that does it for Hellraiser. Lauren, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
okay, I'll give maybe 2. I've been watching a lot of Peter Hyams movies. He did Time Cop
Okay.
in 2010. One really good one that I watched recently was called Narrow Margin. It's from 1990 and has Gene Hackman in it.
Huh.
I watched that, and then I had a lot of fun with a little horror comedy movie on Shudder called Deadstream. I love
I
found
might watch
footage.
that this
Yeah,
week.
it's
Yeah.
so I love found footage, and it finds to me a new way to kind of like modernize it and also like bring something different to it. And I think the actor is one of the writers of the film too. So it's very like the small project, but it's got low budget practical effects, which like I respect
Mhm.
because I anyway. So I recommend Deadstream on Shudder. I had a lot of fun with that one. It provided me jump scares and also laughter, and I feel like it's a great combination.
I don't normally ask this, but one other question. If someone who's only really seen the first 3 Hellraisers and then this new one, wanted to watch one of the direct-to-video ones, what would you recommend?
Oh, I would probably go with what's it called? There's Hellraiser in Space. And I legit it's very Event Horizon-y. There's a reason why people say that Event Horizon is like an unaffiliated,
Sure, yeah.
but I would say
Bloodline, it looks like, is
okay,
that one.
yes,
Hellraiser
Hellraiser
Bloodline?
Bloodline is
Yeah.
the Hellraiser in Space one, and so I would
Uh,
recommend that.
okay.
Which I think
Event
is the third
Horizon,
one, right? So just watch
y
1, 2, and 3,
it's gotta
I
be the
think.
4th,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it. Oh boy, I can't wait.
It's
Lauren, this was
legit good.
great.
Like it's good, I promise. But it just why not go to space? Like Jason went to
Sure.
space. Yeah, they just go to space on the third one. It took Fast and the Furious 9 of them.
They all have to. They all have to eventually. So,
yeah. Hellraiser just
yeah.
jumps right to it. Well, what have we not done? Space. Let's do it. But I recommend it.
Awesome. Well, this is great. Tell people again where they can find you and your podcast.
You can find me at That Movie Is Fine on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram. And then on Instagram, you can find our podcast at That Movie Is Fine Podcast.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing the show, and maybe we can get you back again sometime.
Hey, that'd be great. I had a great time. Thank you so much.
Let me go, please. Oh, yeah, what? Hello? Help me.
Tonight, we are hearing from the father of one of 3 young men killed in a horrific triple murder in Polk County over the weekend.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a joke. Dude, I just killed Cassie. Oh, that felt like fucking real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the up. We gotta get our act straight.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Paradise After Dark is a weekly podcast covering true crime,
Unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
and urban legends.
We cover cases such as the vampire of Dusseldorf,
The Cracker Barrel murders,
the cases of missing Terrence Williams and Felipe Santos,
serial killer Bobby Joe Long, and much more.
You can find us on all podcast platforms.
If you love true crime and all things mysterious, please give us a listen.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Hellraiser. Thanks to Lauren Knight for joining me. Make sure to check out her podcast. Links will be in the show notes, of course. And thank you to you for listening. If you like what we do here on Piecing It Together, make sure you're subscribed wherever it is that you're listening to the show. And you could rate and review us. 5 stars would be very nice. It would be very helpful. It supposedly gets the show to rise up in the rankings, and I don't know if it's true, but let's just go with that, and let's do it. You could also, of course, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And don't forget about that Patreon that I told you about at the top of the episode. If you really want to support us in that way, we would appreciate it. You could check it out. Produced by David Rosen, Patreon, with lots of bonus content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and my music career. And speaking of my music career, I finished up my new album this week. I will be playing more of that in the coming weeks here on the show, also posting snippets on Patreon and all kinds of stuff. I have a lot to do with planning the release of this new album. I'm so excited for you all to hear it. But first, it being a Hellraiser episode, it being the Halloween season, I got to play something scary sounding. So I'm going to go with the album that I put out last Halloween, the Dissection Table, which is a soundtrack to an unreleased film that I scored. And I'm going to play a track called Perdoste from that film. Good, creepy horror stuff. So I felt like this would be a good fit for this episode. So I hope you enjoy it. The album, The Dissection Table, is available anywhere you can stream music. And keep an eye out for my new album coming in the next couple of months. So more on that coming up. But thank you for listening as always, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.